All right, so today is our last day of really talking about quadratics, and we are going to talk about solving quadratics. So we've talked about how to graph quadratics, finding their vertex, intercepts, and domain and range. We talked about factoring quadratics, right? And now we're going to look at how to actually solve quadratics. And anytime we say solve something, we're asking to find the x-intercepts. So I showed you guys how to do the x-intercepts on your calculator. I'm also going to show you how to do this by hand by using factoring and then the quadratic formula. So let's get started. Okay. Sorry for my dog barking in the background. It's a thing that I live with every day. I think someone just delivered my dinner, so I think he's barking at my food, but that's okay. All right, so here we go. All right, so like I said, we're gonna look at two different methods to use when trying to find the solutions or the x-intercepts of our quadratic function. The first one is factoring, and we talked about this in our last video. So there are several types of factoring that we're gonna be using in this class. All right, so we have one method is using a greatest common factor. All right, we have the second method, which is factoring with leading coefficient equaling 1. We have factoring with leading coefficient not equaling 1. And then we have number 4, my personal favorite, the difference of squares. Difference of squares. All right, perfect. Now, if those 4 factoring methods do not work, then I always think of the quadratic formula as a last resort. The reason why I think it's a last resort is because it's the technique where you make the most amount of problems, and people generally just don't do well with it, okay? So even if you think you know your quadratic formula, which is great, you should know your quadratic formula, all right? It's so easy to like make a mistake when you're simplifying it and doing the math. I just really don't recommend quadratic formula unless you have to use it. So if you've already tried to factor and you can't get your x-intercept values, then last resort, go to quadratic formula. It's just not ideal. It doesn't work very well. I mean, it works well every time. It's just, there's a lot of mistakes that happen. All right, not judging. Can happen to anybody, all right? But there are a lot of mistakes that happen when people are doing their quadratic formula. So first I'm gonna write down the quadratic formula. We're not gonna derive it. You guys did that in Algebra 2, doing vertex form. That's a lot. I'm just gonna give it to you. You guys just need to remember it. All right, so it is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That is your quadratic formula. All right, and your letters, remember these are coming from standard form. So ax squared plus bx plus c. So before you can do quadratic formula, you definitely need to make sure that your function is in standard form. If it's not in standard form, you can't do it. All right, so if you look down at our 2 example problems, neither of these problems are in standard form. You see how some of the things are, you have part of it on the left side of the equal sign and part of it on the right side of the equal sign. You can't have that. You need to have everything moved over to one side of the equation before you can do quadratic formula. Truthfully, you need it to be like that before you factor. Okay, so now we're just gonna get into it. We're just gonna do our problems. This should be a pretty quick video. All right, unlike the last 2, I apologize. I'm trying to make them shorter, but I do talk a lot and it takes a long time to write. Just bear with me. They'll get faster as the year goes on. Okay, so first thing we want to do, like I said, is we want to move everything over to one side. So for our problem number 1, we need to move that negative 29x over to the left-hand side. In order to do that, we're just going to add it to both sides. So we're going to add 29x to both sides, bam. All right, so now it's a 0 over on this side, and we have 7x squared plus 29x plus 24 equals 0. Now, I know that I am solving something at this point because I have an equal sign, all right? So you can't solve if it's not an equation. These are equations because they have an equal sign. That is when you know that you can solve for stuff. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and factor. So this is a leading coefficient not equal to 1 because it's a 7. All right, and I don't think I can pull something out from each piece because 7 does not divide into 29, nor does it divide into 24. So I'm stuck where I'm at. There's no greatest common factor that I can take out of here. All right, so now I need to figure out what is 7 times 24. All right, so I'm going to go to my calculator. 7 times 24, and that's 168. So remember, I have to multiply A times C, and that gives me 168. All right, and I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to 168, right? So they have to multiply to 168, and they have to add to my middle term, which is 29. So they have to add to B, and B is 29. Okay, so multiply to 168, add to 29. I'm going to do a little bit of guess and check work over on my end to see if I can figure out what number does that. So I'm going to pause. All right, I just did some guess and checking. So if you look at the calculator, I literally just went through and took 168 and divided it by 2, divided by 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. I knew 5 wasn't going to work because it didn't end in a 5. And it looks like 8 and 21 both multiply to 168, and 8 and 21 adds to 29. So my two numbers that are going to work are going to be 8 and 21. So 8 times 21 equals 168, and 8 plus 21 equals 29. So now I can do my box. All right, I'm going to put my 7x squared right there. I'm going to put my 24 right there, and I'm going to put my 21x and my 8x. All right, and now we're just going to go ahead and we're going to factor. All right, so I now have factored my box. Remember, I'm just reverse multiplying to get my numbers that go on the outside. And so factored, I have 7x plus 8 times x plus 3. And remember, this is all equal to 0 because I am actually going to solve. So at this stage, what I can do now is I want to figure out what x values make this 0. All right, so I'm going to take each piece right here, each one of my factors, and I'm going to equal them to 0, because if the first parentheses is a 0, 0 times whatever the second parentheses is going to give me 0. And if I plug in a 0 for x and get x, whatever that plus 3 is a 0, anything times that first parentheses is going to give me 0. So if one of these parentheses is a 0, it's going to make the whole side 0 because it's multiplication. So I take each piece equal to 0, and then I'm going to solve for x. So I have 7x plus 8 equals 0, and I have x plus 3 equals 0. All right, I'm just going to now solve these little mini equations. So I'm going to start by subtracting 8, and then I'm going to divide by 7. By 7. Technology's not working. All right, so I have x equals -8/7 as one of my values. And then this one is pretty easy. All I have to do is subtract 3. So those are my solutions to my problem. Those are my x-intercepts. All right, so it just wanted me to solve, so I have solved. All right, now if I wanted to make these into coordinates, maybe I was graphing, I would write it like this. This is my x value, my y value is 0, right? Same thing over here. My x value is -3, my y value is 0. Now, it didn't say to do that, but just because we're talking about quadratics and you are going to have to put this all together, I figured we would just get to that extra step, right? Okay, moving on to our second one. So I don't want to do with that green color anymore. Let's do pink. All right, so first thing, just like with the other one, I need to move the 3x over. So x squared plus 3x minus 6 equals 0. All right, and again, just like the other one, I'm going to see if I can take out any greatest common factor. Looking, there isn't one. All right, I have a leading coefficient of 1. So this is actually, if it factors, it should be a pretty easy one. So the first thing I need to do is look for two numbers that multiply to my C value, which is -6, and adds to my B value, which is 3. All right, so can we think of any two numbers that multiply to -6 and add to 3? Well, this one is kind of quick to do because it's kind of small. So multiplying to 6, we have 6 and 1, and we have 2 times 3. All right, that's really the only numbers that are going to multiply to make 6. Neither of those two combinations, no matter where you have a plus or minus, are going to add to make a 3. So this would be a problem that is unfactorable. So if we cannot factor it, our next resort is to use the quadratic formula. So that's what I'm going to do now. So I have x equals -b. So I can go ahead, and if this confuses you, I'm just going to go ahead and erase it because it would confuse my eyeballs because I keep looking at it. All right, so -b, so my b is my 3, so -3 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is -6. Be careful about dropping negatives because you will get the wrong answer. All divided by 2 times a, which is 1. And remember, we're getting those numbers from the standard form, right? ax squared plus bx plus c. So that's where they're coming from. All right, now we just need to simplify this. So we have -3 plus or minus. All right, now I'm going to go to my calculator because I don't trust my mental math. And I'm just going to type in 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times -6. So I'm just putting in the whole thing that's underneath that parentheses, and that's going to give me 33. So plus or minus the square root of 33 all over 2 times 1, which is just 2. Now, if we could go any further, we would at this point try and simplify further, but this is as far as we can simplify. All right, the square root of 33 does not break down any easier. It stays square root of 33. So this is my answer to my problem. All right, well, that was a pretty short video. Like I said, we didn't have too much to cover, so hopefully you guys found that helpful and you can work on your classwork for today. Until next time, bye.